"Stay inside," pleaded the Apache woman, but it was already too late. Riders surrounded her ranch backslash. The soft warmth of the sun touched the wooden fences, the grazing horses, and the little garden where vegetables and herbs grew in neat rows. Birds sang in the trees near the house, and a gentle breeze carried the sweet smell of grass and earth. Everything seemed peaceful, but Maka knew that in the world they lived in, peace could vanish in an instant. Maka was a tall woman with dark hair that fell loosely around her shoulders. Her eyes, sharp and alert, constantly watched for signs of danger. Though she had spent most of her life on this land, she knew that the plains were never truly safe. There were stories of riders passing through, sometimes friendly, sometimes not. Her people had learned to be careful, to watch the horizon and listen to the wind, because danger often came without warning. Inside the small wooden house, the sounds of mourning filled the air. Her children laughed as they ran across the floor, their bare feet making soft thumps on the wooden boards. The smell of bread baking in the oven mixed with the fresh scent of herbs hanging from the ceiling. Maka smiled briefly as she watched them, but her heart was uneasy. There was a tension in the air she could not shake, a feeling that today something would change. She moved quietly, making sure everything was in order. The doors were sturdy, the windows had shutters, and the animals in the barn were safe. She glanced at her husband, who was checking the fences, repairing a broken post with practiced hands. They shared a brief nod, a silent understanding that the world outside their ranch could be harsh, but together they would face whatever came. Suddenly, a distant sound reached her ears, the rhythmic beat of hooves on dry earth. Maka's heart skipped a beat. She walked to the window and squinted toward the horizon. Dust rose in the distance, moving quickly across the plains. Riders, a small group but fast and determined. Maka's body tensed. She knew the signs of trouble and she could feel it deep in her bones. They were heading straight for her home. She hurried outside, calling for her children and husband. "Stay inside," she urged, her voice calm but firm. "Don't come out until I say it's safe." Her husband looked up, concern flashing in his eyes. "Do you think it's serious?" he asked. Maka did not answer with words. She shook her head slightly and gestured toward the approaching riders. There was no time for doubt. Inside, the children looked up at her, fear and confusion written across their faces. Maka knelt beside them, holding their small hands tightly. "We will be safe," she said, her voice steady even though her heart raced. "Stay inside, follow my instructions, and nothing bad will happen." She spoke with the confidence of someone who had faced many challenges before. Her family trusted her. They had to. Outside, the riders grew closer. Maka could see the glint of their weapons, the determined set of their faces. Her mind raced. She thought about the barn, the horses, the livestock, and the small garden that had taken months to cultivate. She thought about the stories her grandmother had told her about courage, survival, and protecting what mattered most. Maka knew that fear would not help her, only action would. She moved quickly, securing the doors and windows as best as she could. She gathered some tools and a few items that could help in an emergency: a knife, a small pouch of supplies, and a blanket. Every movement was precise, every decision deliberate. She could feel the riders' presence getting closer, their hooves pounding louder on the hard ground. Maka's heart beat faster, but her mind remained sharp. Panic would only make mistakes. As she worked, she thought of the land around her, the plains stretching endlessly, the hills in the distance, the rivers that carved paths through the soil. This was her home, and she knew every inch of it. Every tree, every rock, every path had a story, a memory, or a purpose, and she would use that knowledge to protect her family. The first rider reached the edge of the ranch. Maka stepped back into the house, making sure her children were hidden behind sturdy furniture. She could hear the riders' voices now, shouting commands, their horses neighing loudly. Dust filled the air, swirling around the fences and garden. Maka's husband moved quietly, positioning himself near the back of the house, ready to help defend their home. Maka's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She wondered why the riders were coming, what they wanted, and whether they would leave peacefully or force her family to fight. She felt a surge of determination. She had faced challenges before, storms, illnesses, and even theft, but this felt different. This felt like a test not only of her courage but of her wisdom and quick thinking. Time seemed to slow. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the ranch. Maka could hear the hooves closer, could see the dust clouds moving with purpose. She held her children close, whispering calming words, telling them stories of brave people from her tribe, stories of cleverness and survival. She wanted them to feel safe, even if the danger was real and terrifying. As the riders surrounded the ranch, Maka knew that this was only the beginning. She could see their eyes focused and intent. There was no turning back, but she also knew that panic would destroy them. Courage and careful planning would keep them alive. Maka took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She had to stay strong for her children, for her family, and for the land she loved. Every movement now mattered. Every decision counted. Maka's eyes darted around the ranch, noting possible exits, hiding places, and ways to protect her family. She remembered the secret paths her ancestors had used, the hidden corners of the land that only she and her family knew. There was hope, and she would find it. The morning air was thick with tension. Dust swirled around the fences. Horses snorted nervously. The children clung to Maka's side, trusting her completely. She whispered once more, "Stay inside. Do exactly as I say." And for now, that was all they could do: wait, watch, and hope that her preparations and quick thinking would be enough. The sound of hooves grew louder, echoing across the plains and vibrating through the wooden floorboards of Maka's house. Dust clouds swirled in the morning sunlight, signaling the riders' approach. Maka's heart pounded, but she moved with calm precision, knowing that panic would only put her family at greater risk. She crouched beside her children, guiding them to the safest corner of the room, behind a sturdy oak table. Her youngest clung tightly to her skirts, wide-eyed and trembling, while the older ones exchanged anxious glances. Her husband, Tayan, had taken a position near the back door, ready to defend the family if needed. He was strong and steady, but even he felt the tension in the air. Together, they had faced storms, wild animals, and accidents on the ranch, but this felt different. The riders were determined, and their intentions were unknown. Maka's mind raced through every possible scenario. They could be seeking revenge, trying to steal their livestock, or simply testing her family's defenses. "Remember what I told you," Maka whispered, brushing her youngest's hair back from her face. "Stay low, stay quiet. We do not move unless I say so." Her voice was calm, but her eyes scanned every window, every door, and every corner for any sign of weakness. The children nodded, their small hands gripping hers tightly. Outside, the riders slowed as they reached the edge of the ranch. Dust rose around their horses' hooves, and the sound of metal against leather filled the air. Maka watched them carefully through a crack in the shutters. There were 5 of them, mounted on strong horses, their faces set and serious. They were not careless travelers. They were purposeful, their movements precise. Maka realized they would not leave without attempting to enter the ranch. She glanced at her husband. "We need to stay inside. Don't confront them yet." Tayan nodded, understanding her plan. They had a home, a family, and knowledge of the land on their side. That was their advantage. Maka took a deep breath and moved to reinforce the doors. She pushed heavy furniture against the entrance and checked the latches, making sure they could not be easily forced open. Every movement was deliberate, every action aimed at keeping her family safe. The children sat quietly, trying to appear brave, though their fear was evident. Maka knelt beside them, telling stories of their ancestors, tales of cleverness, courage, and survival. She described how their forebears had faced greater dangers and had always found a way to protect their families and their homes. "You are strong," she told them. "You are brave. And today we will face this together." Her words were meant to soothe, but they also steeled her own resolve. The riders dismounted, spreading out around the perimeter of the ranch. Dust and debris rose with every step, making the air thick and heavy. Maka could see the glint of their weapons and the determined set of their faces. One rider approached the main gate, testing the latch with a quick pull. Maka's pulse quickened. They were evaluating the ranch, looking for weaknesses, trying to understand how best to enter. She whispered instructions to Tayan and the older children. "If they break in, do not panic. Follow me. We have a hidden place behind the barn. Everyone must stay together." The plan was simple but required precision. Maka had spent years learning every corner of the property, and now that knowledge became a lifeline. The first rider kicked the gate lightly, testing the wood. Maka could hear it creak but hold firm. She felt a sense of relief, but it was brief. The riders were skilled and patient. They would find a way in. Maka knew that if they forced the gate, chaos would erupt instantly, and there would be no time for hesitation. She moved silently around the house, checking each window, each door, and every potential point of entry. The wind carried the riders' voices, rough and commanding, but she focused on her family, her home, and the tasks at hand. Every corner of the house was now prepared. Furniture was strategically placed, doors were reinforced, and hidden supplies were ready. She had done all she could, and now it was a matter of patience, courage, and timing. From her vantage point, Maka noticed that the riders were communicating with hand signals, indicating coordination and careful planning. They were organized and their movements were deliberate. Maka realized that she needed to be equally strategic. She had to anticipate their actions and prepare her family for every possibility. Her mind raced with ideas. Perhaps she could create a diversion, drawing some of the riders away from the house. Perhaps she could use the terrain to her advantage, leading them into traps she had prepared. Every possibility required calm thought, and Maka forced herself to breathe slowly, keeping panic at bay. Meanwhile, the children grew restless. Her youngest whimpered softly, and the older ones exchanged worried glances. Maka knelt beside them again. "We are safe here," she said. "They cannot reach us if we follow the plan. Trust me." Her words were meant to reassure them, but they also reminded her of the weight of responsibility she carried. Her family's lives depended on her courage and quick thinking. The riders began to test the perimeter further, walking along the fences, examining the barn and checking the back of the house. Maka watched carefully, noting their movements, predicting their next steps. She could see that one rider had discovered the small garden and paused to inspect it. She realized that they might try to take food or animals if given the chance. That thought strengthened her resolve. She whispered to Tayan, "We need to be ready. If they try to take anything, we must act, but only when necessary. Do not rush. Do not fight unless it is the only way." Tayan nodded, understanding the delicate balance between caution and action. They were a family united by purpose, each member aware of their role and responsibilities. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The sun climbed higher and the heat began to rise. Dust filled the air, and the distant sounds of hooves and voices became almost constant. Maka's muscles ached from standing and moving constantly, but she did not allow herself to rest. Every moment counted, and she needed to be alert. Suddenly, one rider approached the front door again, testing it more forcefully this time. Maka's heart leapt into her throat. She crouched low beside the children, her mind racing. She whispered instructions. "Stay quiet, do not move, do not speak, wait for my signal." The rider's boot struck the wood with a sharp sound, but the door held firm. Maka breathed slowly, counting to 10 in her mind to calm herself. She realized that the riders were not just testing the gates, they were trying to intimidate, to provoke fear. Maka understood that their strategy relied on making her family panic. But she would not give them that satisfaction. She looked at her children, their eyes wide with fear, and forced herself to smile gently. "We are brave," she whispered. "We are strong. Nothing can harm us if we stay together and follow the plan." Hours seemed to pass as the riders continued to surround the ranch. Maka moved silently, checking on her family, reinforcing weak points, and preparing for the next phase of action. Her mind never stopped working. She considered every possibility. If the riders entered through the barn, through the fence, or even through the windows, she had contingencies ready. Every corner of the ranch had been prepared to provide safety. Despite the fear, Maka felt a quiet pride. She had trained herself for moments like this, learned from past experiences, and relied on the wisdom passed down from her ancestors. She knew that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. And she would act. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Maka noticed subtle changes in the riders' behavior. They seemed more cautious, more deliberate, as if they were realizing that the family they faced was not weak or defenseless. Maka felt a small surge of hope. Perhaps they would retreat, perhaps they would reconsider, but she knew better than to rely on hope alone. Preparation and courage were her true allies. The day stretched on, filled with tension, strategy, and careful observation. Maka kept her children calm, spoke softly to her husband, and watched the riders' movements with unwavering focus. Every sound, every shadow, every movement mattered, and though fear lingered, it was tempered by determination. By evening, the riders had tested the ranch multiple times, but they had not broken through. Maka realized that the family's preparedness and her quick thinking had given them an advantage. Yet she also knew that the danger was far from over. The night would bring new challenges, and the family would need every ounce of courage and wisdom to survive. As the sun set, painting the plains with orange and pink light, Maka held her children close and whispered, "We have made it through the day. Stay strong. Tomorrow will come and we will face it together." Her words were a promise, a declaration, and a source of comfort. The ranch was surrounded. The riders were near, but Maka's family remained united, safe for now, and ready for whatever came next. The sun was beginning to sink behind the hills, casting long shadows across Maka's ranch. The golden light turned the dust from the approaching riders into a haze that seemed almost like a storm rolling across the plains. Maka's heart beat faster as she moved quietly through the house, checking on her children. She could hear the distant shouts of the riders and the rhythmic pounding of hooves that seemed to shake the earth itself. The time for waiting had ended. She knew that the riders were ready to act, and any moment could become a test of courage, skill, and survival. "Stay close to me," Maka whispered to her children, guiding them to the corner she had prepared as their safest spot. Her husband, Tayan, took his place near the back, holding a sturdy stick he had sharpened to defend them if needed. The older children held smaller tools in their hands, not weapons really, but objects they could use in an emergency. Maka could feel their tension, their fear, but she also felt the strength of their trust. They believed in her, and she would not let them down. The first rider reached the main gate and tested it with a hard push. The wood creaked but held firm. Maka's eyes never left the door. She knew that they were sizing up her defenses, looking for weaknesses. One of the riders dismounted and began moving toward the barn, possibly thinking of stealing horses or livestock. Maka quickly grabbed a small pouch with supplies and whispered instructions to her husband. "If they go to the barn, we use the hidden path behind it. Lead the children through, but only if necessary. Otherwise, stay quiet here." Tayan nodded, understanding that every second mattered and that their survival depended on patience and cleverness as much as bravery. The riders split into two groups. One remained near the main house, testing the doors and windows, while the other moved toward the barn. Dust swirled around their horses, making it difficult to see clearly. Maka stayed low, her eyes scanning the movement carefully. Her mind was calculating every possible action. If they broke through, if they tried to enter through a window, if they attempted to take the animals. She had prepared for each possibility, but the unpredictability of human behavior added a dangerous uncertainty. Suddenly, a loud shout echoed across the yard. One rider had discovered the side gate and tried to force it open. Maka's heart leapt into her throat, but she forced herself to remain calm. She whispered instructions to the children: "Stay down, stay silent. Do not move." Her voice was steady, but inside she felt the rush of adrenaline that comes when danger is immediate. The rider kicked at the gate again. Dust and splinters flew as the wood began to crack. Maka knew she could not wait any longer if the gate broke. She moved quickly to the back of the house, signaling to Tayan. They would need to protect the children and possibly move them to the hidden area behind the barn. Her mind was sharp, every step calculated to ensure their safety. The rider finally broke the gate, but Maka had already anticipated it. She opened a small hidden door near the back, guiding her children through the dark path she had cleared weeks before. The older children followed closely, holding hands to ensure no one was left behind. Tayan brought up the rear, keeping an eye on the intruders. Maka led them silently through the shadows, her heart racing, knowing that any noise could alert the riders. The hidden path wound through a thicket of trees and tall grasses. The children's footsteps were quiet, but even so, Maka felt the tension of each moment. She whispered encouragement, telling them stories of their ancestors, cleverness and bravery, hoping to give them courage and calm their fear. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig made her flinch, but she pressed forward, focused on reaching the safety of the concealed area behind the barn. Meanwhile, the riders spread out, searching for signs of movement. Their voices grew louder as frustration set in. One shouted, and another laughed, confident that they had cornered the family. Maka listened carefully, analyzing their strategy. They were skilled, but they had underestimated her knowledge of the land and her ability to plan ahead. She knew that the next few minutes could decide whether her family survived or suffered harm. As they reached the concealed spot, Maka quickly ensured that everyone was hidden. The children crouched behind barrels and haystacks, their wide eyes peeking out to see the intruders. Tayan stayed close to Maka, ready to defend them if needed. The family was cramped but safe for the moment. Maka took a deep breath and whispered, "We must be patient. They will not find us if we remain quiet. Do not move unless I tell you." The riders approached the barn. Dust rose with every step. One of them attempted to open the main door but found it bolted securely. Frustration showed on their faces. Maka realized that their impatience might work in her favor. They were becoming reckless, and a single misstep could give her family the opportunity to escape further or defend themselves if necessary. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as the riders investigated every corner. Maka kept the children calm, whispering stories and instructions, reminding them to breathe slowly and stay still. She felt her own muscles tighten with fatigue, but she did not allow it to show. Her courage needed to be visible, even if it was quiet and controlled, for the sake of her family's morale. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the barn. One of the riders had managed to force a small side door open. Maka's heart raced. She whispered to the children, "Stay down. Be ready to move when I say." They nodded, fear and determination shining in their eyes. Maka felt a surge of pride in their bravery. They were learning quickly, understanding the necessity of courage in the face of danger. Maka decided it was time to act. Using her knowledge of the land, she quietly slipped out from the hiding spot, leading one of the older children with her. She needed to create a diversion, to draw some of the riders away from the family. Every step was careful, every sound controlled. She threw a small stone to make noise in one direction, then quickly moved in another, catching the attention of two riders who had been focused on the barn. The riders followed the noise, moving away from the main hiding spot. Maka's heart pounded as she ran, but she did not falter. She needed them to be distracted long enough for her family to move to safety if required. She returned quickly to the hidden area, signaling the children and Tayan to be ready. They remained hidden, eyes wide, waiting for her signal. The riders, confused and frustrated, began shouting at each other, unsure of where the family had gone. Maka used this moment to check the children and reassure them. "We are safe," she whispered. "We are brave. They will not find us if we stay calm." Her words were more than comfort, they were a shield, a way to keep their spirits strong. As darkness began to fall, the riders' energy started to wane. Some were tired from searching and kicking at doors, while others argued about the best approach. Maka watched from the shadows, calculating the next steps. She realized that nightfall could work in her favor. The darkness would provide cover if she needed to move the family further, and the riders' visibility would be limited. She prepared the hidden path behind the barn, ensuring it was clear and safe for her family to move if needed. She whispered instructions to Tayan. "At the first sign of danger, we move together. Everyone stays close. Everyone stays quiet. We survive as one." Tayan nodded, and the children clung to Maka's skirts, understanding that survival required obedience, courage, and careful timing. The night settled in, bringing cooler air and a veil of darkness over the plains. Maka's ranch was quiet now, except for the distant sounds of the riders still searching nearby. Her family remained hidden, safe for the moment, and she knew that every hour would test their endurance and courage. She whispered once more, "We are strong, we are brave, together we will survive." Though the danger had reached its peak, Maka felt a sense of control. She had prepared, acted with courage, and used her knowledge of the land to protect her family. The riders might have surrounded the ranch, but they had underestimated the strength, cleverness, and resilience of Maka and her loved ones. And as long as she remained vigilant, as long as she remained calm and focused, there was hope for the night and the days to come. The night had fully settled over Maka's ranch. Darkness cloaked the fields, the barn, and the house, turning familiar landmarks into shadows and shapes that seemed almost unrecognizable. The air was cool and still, broken only by the distant sounds of the riders, who were still searching for the family they had failed to capture earlier. Maka crouched in the hidden area behind the barn, her children close to her, their small bodies trembling from fatigue and fear. Her husband, Tayan, kept a vigilant eye on the approaching shadows. Despite the danger, Maka felt a quiet determination. The night was her ally now, and she intended to use it to her advantage. She whispered softly to the children, "Stay calm, stay quiet. We are strong and we will find a way." The children nodded, trusting her completely. They had seen her bravery before, but this was different. This was real danger, and Maka's courage had become a lifeline. Every word she spoke, every instruction she gave, was designed to calm them and strengthen their resolve. Maka moved carefully to the edge of the hidden area, peeking through the tall grass. She could see two riders approaching the barn, their lanterns casting small circles of light on the ground. They were looking for signs of movement, but Maka had made sure the area was clear. She noted the uneven terrain, the scattered barrels, and the piles of hay that could serve as cover or obstacles. A plan began forming in her mind. She would use the land and the environment to mislead the riders, drawing them away from the hiding place where her family remained safe. She whispered to Tayan, "We need to create a diversion. I will lead two of them away, and you stay here with the children. If anything happens, move them deeper into the hidden path." Tayan nodded, understanding the risk but trusting her judgment. Maka's plan was risky, but she knew that staying hidden without action could eventually fail. The riders were determined, and patience alone would not save them. Carefully, Maka picked up a few small stones. She tossed them one by one, creating noises in a direction away from the hidden spot. The riders' heads turned toward the sounds, their attention momentarily distracted. Maka moved quickly through the shadows, keeping her body low and silent. She could feel her heart pounding, but her mind was sharp. Every step, every movement was calculated to keep her hidden and guide the riders away from her family. The riders split, following the noises and shadows Maka created. She led them in a circle around the barn, using the uneven terrain and hidden ditches to make the path appear confusing and difficult. Her knowledge of the land gave her the advantage. She moved silently, weaving between trees and rocks, keeping herself visible enough to distract the riders but not so visible that they would capture her. Meanwhile, Tayan stayed behind with the children, keeping them calm and quiet. He whispered stories and instructions, mirroring Maka's guidance. The children were frightened, but they felt safe with their parents' presence. Maka's cleverness gave them a sense of hope, even in the darkness. They knew that she was doing everything possible to protect them. The riders became frustrated as they followed the misleading noises and shadows. They shouted at each other, arguing over the best way to find the family. Maka used this to her advantage, subtly guiding them toward a small grove of trees at the far edge of the property. There, the uneven ground and fallen branches slowed their progress, and Maka could see that two of them were beginning to tire and lose patience. Returning briefly to check on the hidden area, Maka saw that Tayan and the children remained safe. She smiled briefly, a small but powerful relief, before continuing her plan. She needed to make sure the riders were fully distracted and that her family had the maximum chance to move or defend themselves if necessary. She led one rider further into the grove, then quickly doubled back, using the shadows and terrain to remain unseen. Her movements were careful and precise. Each time the rider thought he had spotted her, she disappeared into the darkness, forcing him to chase shadows and waste energy. Maka's cleverness and understanding of human behavior gave her control. She was no longer reacting to the riders. She was guiding them, using their own determination against them. Back at the barn, Tayan quietly guided the children deeper into the hidden path. He whispered encouragement and reassured them that their mother was doing everything to keep them safe. The children's fear remained, but their trust in their parents strengthened. They had already survived a day of tension, and now they were learning that courage, patience, and cleverness could help them survive even greater challenges. The diversion worked perfectly. One by one, the riders were drawn away from the barn and the house, chasing sounds and shadows that Maka created. Their confusion grew, and Maka knew that it was only a matter of time before their determination waned. She had successfully used her intelligence, knowledge of the land, and quick thinking to gain the upper hand, but she also knew she could not let her guard down. The riders were persistent, and the night was long. As she returned to the hidden area, Maka gathered her family quietly. "We will move a little further," she whispered. "Follow me closely and do exactly as I say." The children held onto her hands tightly, their small fingers grasping her firmly. Tayan carried their youngest, ensuring that no one was left behind. Together, they moved carefully through the hidden path, using shadows, tall grasses, and uneven terrain to stay unseen. The riders' shouts grew fainter as they followed the false trails Maka had created. Dust rose in the distance, marking their movements, but they were far enough away to give Maka's family some breathing room. She felt a surge of relief and pride. Her plan had worked and her family was safe, at least for now. But she remained vigilant, knowing that the night could still bring unexpected dangers. Along the way, Maka reminded the children of what they had already accomplished. "You have been brave," she whispered. "You have stayed calm. That is how we survive. Remember this courage. It will guide you in the days to come." The children listened, absorbing her words like a shield against their fear. They were learning that survival was not only about hiding, it was about patience, intelligence, and staying together as a family. Finally, Maka led them to a small clearing hidden by trees and rocks, a place she had prepared for emergencies. It was safe, out of the riders' sight, and gave them space to rest while maintaining a defensive advantage. She arranged the children and her husband carefully, ensuring they remained concealed but could move quickly if needed. She took a moment to breathe, feeling the tension slowly drain from her muscles. Even in the quiet of the clearing, Maka remained alert. She listened for the riders' movements, the rustle of leaves, the snapping of twigs. She knew that night could hide many dangers, but it also gave her control. By understanding the land, reading the riders' behavior, and staying calm, she had turned a dangerous situation into an advantage. Her family was safe, and they had the opportunity to survive the night because of her courage and intelligence. As the hours passed, Maka reinforced the clearing with branches and rocks, creating small obstacles that would slow any intruders. She whispered instructions to Tayan and the older children, explaining how to stay quiet, move silently, and respond if someone approached. Every detail was important, and she made sure that everyone understood their role. The children nodded, absorbing her guidance, while Tayan watched with admiration and trust. By the time the first light of dawn began to peek over the hills, Maka's family had survived the night. The riders were still present in the distance, but their determination had waned, and some had begun to retreat, frustrated by the cleverness and resilience of the family they had tried to intimidate. Maka's plan had worked and her family was safe, their courage and unity allowing them to face what could have been a devastating attack. Maka took a moment to look at her children, their faces illuminated by the soft morning light. "We did it," she whispered. "We have survived. Together we are strong, and together we will face whatever comes next." Her words were more than relief. They were a promise, a lesson, and a source of strength. The family had endured a night of fear and danger, and they had come through it because of intelligence, courage, and unity. The night had been a turning point. Maka had shown that careful planning, quick thinking, and bravery could overcome seemingly overwhelming odds. She had protected her family not only with physical actions, but with guidance, teaching, and reassurance. And as the sun rose higher, filling the plains with light once more, Maka knew that her family's survival was not just a moment of luck. It was a result of courage, cleverness, and unwavering determination. The first rays of sunlight began to touch the plains, turning the dark night into soft shades of gold and orange. Maka stood quietly, looking over the land that she had fought so hard to protect. Her family huddled close behind her, still tired from the night of tension and fear. The riders were gone, at least for now, their shouts and hooves fading into the distance. The danger had passed, but the ranch bore the marks of the night's struggle. Broken fences, disturbed hay, and scattered stones told the story of what had happened, yet the family remained safe. Maka allowed herself a deep, quiet breath. For the first time in hours, she felt the weight of relief. She turned to her children, their small faces pale but bright with cautious hope. "We have survived," she said softly, her voice carrying both warmth and strength. "You have been brave. You have stayed calm. And because of that, we are together and safe." The children smiled faintly, exhaustion mingled with pride. They understood that the night had been a test of courage, and they had passed it. Maka's words were more than comfort. They were lessons, reinforcing the importance of bravery, patience, and unity. Her husband, Tayan, approached her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were incredible," he said quietly. "Your planning, your calmness, it saved us all." Maka nodded, but she shook her head slightly. "We all survived together," she said. "We all played a part. Courage is strongest when it is shared." He smiled, realizing the truth in her words. The family had survived because of each member's trust, obedience, and calmness under pressure, guided by Maka's leadership. Maka moved through the ranch carefully, inspecting the damage. The main gate had been broken, some fence posts were splintered, and the barn showed signs of disturbance, but nothing had been stolen. The family's animals were safe, and the garden, though a little trampled, had survived. Maka allowed herself a small smile. The land was her life, her work, and her pride, and she would restore it, stronger than before. She knew that rebuilding would take effort, but she also knew that the lessons of courage and planning would guide her. The children, curious and still full of energy despite their exhaustion, began to explore the clearing where they had hidden. Maka watched them closely, relieved to see them safe and unharmed. She encouraged them to stretch, to drink water, and to eat some bread and fruit she had kept hidden for emergencies. Even small comforts mattered after the night of fear and suspense. Tayan helped gather the children, teaching them how to move carefully through the ranch to avoid injury while inspecting the damage. As the sun rose higher, Maka called the family together. "We need to rebuild," she said. "The ranch is strong, but we must repair what was broken. Together, we will make it even better than before." The children listened intently, understanding the importance of the work. This was not just physical labor, it was a lesson in resilience. Every fence post replaced, every patch of trampled ground restored, was a symbol of their strength, courage, and ability to overcome hardship. They worked steadily through the morning. Tayan repaired the broken gate while Maka supervised, ensuring that each step was done carefully and correctly. The older children helped lift small tools and materials, while the younger ones tidied the garden and fed the animals. Even in the face of exhaustion, their spirits were high. They had faced fear together and had survived. Now, they were turning that experience into action, rebuilding not just their ranch, but their confidence, their pride, and their unity as a family. While working, Maka reflected on the events of the previous day and night. She thought about the riders and their determination, their persistence, and the danger they had posed. She realized that fear had been natural, but it had been courage, knowledge, and careful planning that had protected her family. Every lesson she had learned from her ancestors, the understanding of the land, the patience required to survive, the importance of staying calm under pressure, had guided her decisions. And now, these lessons were becoming part of her children's lives as well. By midday, the ranch was beginning to look orderly again. The fence was repaired, the barn door reinforced, and the animals returned to their pens. Maka took a moment to rest, sitting in the shade of a tree, watching the plains stretch endlessly into the horizon. She allowed herself a few minutes of quiet reflection. She knew that danger could return at any time, but she also knew that her family was ready. They had survived the night, learned from it, and strengthened the bond that would protect them in the future. The children gathered around her, curious about the events that had unfolded. Maka knelt down and explained, in simple words, what they had experienced and why their actions had mattered. "You have learned something important," she said. "Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting wisely, carefully, and together even when you are afraid. Remember this lesson, and it will guide you for the rest of your life." The children listened, absorbing her words as if they were treasures. They understood that the night had been a trial, but also an opportunity to grow stronger. Tayan joined her, and together they watched the sun climb higher, feeling the warmth on their faces. "We have survived," he said again, but now with a sense of joy rather than exhaustion. "And we have learned. Nothing can take that away from us." Maka nodded, smiling. The night had been terrifying, but it had also revealed the strength of their family. They were not just survivors, they were resilient, resourceful, and united. As the afternoon approached, Maka and her family began to enjoy small comforts they had missed during the night. They shared food, laughed quietly, and told stories. The tension of fear had lifted, replaced by a sense of pride and relief. Even the youngest children, who had been most frightened, felt a spark of courage and understanding. They had witnessed bravery in action, and it had inspired them. Maka also reflected on the land itself. She looked at the fields, the barn, and the fences, realizing that the ranch was more than a place to live. It was a symbol of their hard work, their love, and their unity. Protecting it had required courage, planning, and determination. Rebuilding it was not just a task, but a continuation of their strength. Maka knew that this connection to the land would guide her family through future challenges. As the day came to an end, Maka gathered her family together once more. "We have faced fear," she said, "and we have come through it. We are stronger because we stayed together, because we stayed calm, and because we acted wisely. Never forget this night, but also never forget that you have the courage to face anything." Her words were gentle but powerful, a reminder of what they had survived and what they were capable of achieving. The family sat together on the porch as the sun set, painting the plains in deep shades of orange and pink. The air was still warm, carrying the faint scent of grass, flowers, and earth. Maka's heart was full of gratitude. She had protected her family, guided them through danger, and shown them the value of courage, intelligence, and unity. The ranch was safe once more, and the family was stronger than before. In the quiet moments of the evening, Maka allowed herself to feel relief and pride, but also hope. She knew that life on the plains could be harsh and unpredictable, but she also knew that her family had the strength to endure. They had survived the night, learned important lessons, and emerged stronger, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. Maka looked at the horizon one last time before nightfall, her heart steady. The riders had gone, the ranch was intact, and her family was safe. She whispered softly to herself, "We survived, we are brave, and together nothing can break us." Her words were both a reflection and a promise to her family, to the land, and to herself. That night, as the family settled down to sleep in their home, the air was filled with a sense of peace. The danger had passed, but the lessons remained. Courage, unity, careful planning, and trust had protected them. The ranch was more than a home. It was a symbol of resilience, strength, and hope. Maka closed her eyes, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She had done what she needed to do, and her family was safe, whole, and ready for the future. And in the darkness, a sense of calm settled over the plains. Maka's family had survived the night, and they would face the days ahead with courage, wisdom, and the unwavering bond that had kept them alive when it mattered most.